Welcome back. I'm Scott Murray. He is David Hamilton, and we come to you from our studios here at Murray Media in Dallas, Texas. Delighted to have you here for our two-day Defense Innovation Summit. Delighted to have you here. And America's Future Series continues to put on a good show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was the gentleman that had that concept over a decade ago, and it's amazing what you've done. So congratulations. Well done.
Thank you for saying that. Appreciate it. Want to thank everybody involved, and I want to encourage anybody who wants to have an event like this, have programs like this, to contact Murray Media. You guys do a fantastic job. You put these things on, hundreds of other events. You've pivoted brilliantly during COVID.
Yeah, that was a challenge, but I tell you what, my business partner is my son. He's the one with the technology.
Yeah, he's the one that helped do all that pivoting.
Thank you. No, he did a great job. So we still do the things that we normally did before the pandemic, but we've become a virtual world as well. So it's been fun. It's been fun. And here we are at our studios right here, our anchor desk, and delighted to have America's Future Series alongside today and tomorrow.
Yes,
right.
So everyone, please tweet and post and reshare and
for sure.
Everything else on the interweb.
For sure.
That you're here. Tell your friends.
That's right.
Let them know we have 2 days of programming. If you signed up for one of the earlier ones, you're registered for this one. So it was all part of the Cyberland Air, Sea, and Space.
Kind of a total package.
And we will have another almost 2 days of programming. So I hope everyone can tune in and tell their friends about it.
Yep.
But we're going to get moving forward. And I would love to bring on a very good friend of ours, Lieutenant Colonel Arnel David. And I hope I say his last name correctly. I mean, it's my name. It's not David, but it's close, right? I should be able to do that. So, Colonel, how are you today, sir?
Sir, I'm good. Thanks for having me. This is really good so far. Yeah.
Great to see you. And thanks for all your support, helping put all these things together. Thanks for help putting the conversation together with General Sir Mark Carlton Smith and General Mike Murray. That was largely your doing. So we appreciate all that and all the other people you've introduced us to. And we look forward to your conducting a great conversation here in a second. But before we do that, I'd love the audience to know a little bit about you. So I'm going to go ahead and read your bio. It's a short one. It's not the long version, but anyway. So Lieutenant Colonel Arnel David is a civil affairs officer and Army strategist serving in the United Kingdom with the NATO Allied Rapid Reaction Corps as the DACOSG-5. Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't know what that means, but it's I know it's important, sir. He has served multiple tours of duty in conventional and special operations units where he deployed to the Middle East, Central Asia, and Pacific. He's a distinguished military graduate from Valley Forge Military College, has an MA from the University of Oklahoma, and completed an MMAS in the Local Dynamics of War Scholars Program at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. He recently completed an artificial intelligence program at the University of Oxford Said Business School and is a PhD candidate with King's College London. He is a co-author of Military Strategy in the 21st Century, People, Connectivity, and Competition. Excuse me for butchering that, sir. Really honored to have you. You're a Renaissance man, man of many talents, and really a wonderful person. And we want to thank you for all of your support. And we look forward to your great conversation with these leaders coming up next, sir.
No, thank you, David and Mr. Murray. It's fantastic to be part of this. So appreciate it. And as of today, I'm promotable to Colonel. So big news for the family. Thank you.
Congratulations, Colonel.
All good. So we have a super panel for everybody here. Some fantastic general leaders and generals here. So General Tom Copinger-Symes, General Matthew Van Wagenen, and General Charles T. Cleveland. As you see him popping up now, just stand fast for General Cleveland, sir. There you are. Good deal. So I'll just take a quick minute to introduce these gentlemen. You see the title of our panel is, what does it take to successfully innovate in defense? And all these gentlemen are selected because they've all successfully done that within the organizations they belong to within defense. So I'll just take a quick minute to introduce these generals. Lieutenant General retired Charles Cleveland was the former commander of U.S. Army Special Operations Command. He brought about some big changes in this organization that impacted the whole Special Operations Committee. He's authored and co-authored some great books in the past years, The American Irregular Way of War and The Military Strategy in the 21st Century. Major General Tom Copinger-Symes is the director of a new digital transformation organization in the Ministry of Defense. He was instrumental in bringing about cultural change in the British Army on information maneuver and is now integrating artificial intelligence applications in UK defense as his role as the director of military digitization of Strategic Command of the United Kingdom. Brigadier General Matthew Van Wagenen is the Deputy Chief of Staff of Operations at the Allied Rapid Reaction Corps, but he's on his way next month to become the Deputy Commanding General for 5th Corps stationed over in Poland. General Van Wagenen has led a number of changes in NATO and has loads of European experience working with our partners and allies. His leadership style and approach has led to innovative change in the organizations that he has led. And then finally, we should have Brigadier General Johnny Davis as well online. He is the Chief of Staff of Army Futures Command. General Davis is at the center of innovative change in the Army, where he managed the team that is integrating concepts and capabilities to be delivered for the United States Army. So his next job is going to be taking over as the Commanding General of ROTC Cadet Command. So without further ado, gentlemen, if you can turn on your cameras. So General Cleveland, I'll start with you, sir. If we can begin with you, do you mind sharing with the audience what you've achieved in USASOC at the U.S. Army Special Operations Command? Many of us that came from that community know of your legendary status and how you're a change agent for special operations. What'd you do, sir? What'd you learn from that experience?
Well, first of all, Arnel, congratulations on your promotion to Colonel. It's well deserved. Anybody that's worked with you, served with you, understands and realizes that very well deserved. I will tell you that my experience at USASOC, we were able to take a crisis and turn a crisis, use the momentum behind the crisis to make the needed changes that at least I thought we had to undertake within U.S. Army Special Operations Command. You have to remember, I started my career ancient times back in the Cold War. Some on here may remember the Cold War, but for most of you, it was something it was the last chapter of your history book, probably. All right. But in my plebe year at West Point was when we unceremoniously evacuated the embassy in Saigon. And so my first year as a military professional really started with what amounted to America's first loss and what I would later come to term a population-centric war. Scroll forward 34 years, and I find myself with the great fortune of being appointed to command the U.S. Army Special Operations Command. Now, in the intervening period, I watched our Army go through various sinusoidal, expansions and then contractions, expansions and contractions. And in fact, we're today on the cusp of another contraction, right? I think it's inherent in the way America has configured itself to defend its national interest. And my contraction, which generated, if you will, the crisis, was when the Obama administration had decided that we were going to move we were leaving Iraq. I can remember as a SOC CENT commander before I went to USASOC, what about zero? Don't you understand? Was kind of the word that came back. But sir, we know we need to have at least, and of course it was always you soft guys, get back in your box and, what about zero? Don't you understand? So in that environment, the Army saw its, basically the peace dividend was going to be reaped again. And that sent tremor through, if you will, the Army. And for the first time, the SOCOM community was also going to take a cut. Now, it was primarily going to be a cut in the POM years, the out years, but it then fell to me in 2012 when I assumed command at USASOC to make those cuts. And they amounted to about $250 million, which back then was quite a bit of money. Still a fair piece of change. Ours is an Army organization, so most of our capital is in people. And so what that meant was, in my view, the only place that I can get those kinds of dollars without ripping out the entire infrastructure and modernization plan was to take it out of people. And so that was the approach that we took. Change in our organization came in two parts. One was there was the internal change that I wanted to seek. And then there was an external change that I thought was necessary, because from my time as a plebe until my time as the commanding general at U.S. Army Special Operations Command, I had witnessed my country struggle with each and every population-centric conflict that it was engaged with. And to me, as a professional who had gone through the Army schooling system, professional military education, had learned my lessons for traditional war, increasingly I thought that we had a fundamental flaw in the way we were viewing our national security requirements. So not only did I think we needed to do some changes internal, one, to pay for the bill, but also to fix some things that I saw internally that were impacting readiness within the formation. And I thought that in the process, we could fix some gaps in what we are providing our Army and providing to the nation in terms of special warfare in the Army, from the Army, as well as try to set the predicate for changes that I thought were needed on a larger scale. Now, they're both linked. And it was all born of what I think is the first principle, and that's opportunity. I had opportunity because of the budget crisis, sequestration that demanded change, that it gave me an opportunity to take 37 years of scar tissue, plebe, and time at, over in special forces to basically say, okay, we need to make these changes. And so we started on this program. So opportunity was the first thing. The second thing I think is vision. And again, that was an accumulation of calluses and scar tissue from my time in the military. You know, it was a lot of good times. It was a lot of challenging times, but there was nothing. I noticed that what I was experiencing was most of my practical knowledge was based on experience. In the form of warfare that I practiced, whether it was counter-narcotics operations in Bolivia, it was planning for irregular warfare in Panama during the invasion and then post-invasion, or it was operating in South America to help the Colombians get the hostages back, or operating in CENTCOM against, pick an adversary in CENTCOM, that we were struggling, and that we really had, in my view, we were fundamentally flawed in the way we were approaching the problem. And so over the time, my inklings as a young lieutenant and, you know, became kind of opinions as a mid-captain that became beliefs as a field grade, and that as a general officer, frankly, became convictions. And I said, okay, you know, I now need to make these changes. I have an opportunity to make the changes. And frankly, I'm obligated to do what I can to make these changes. And so that's what we set about to do. And we then I had a very talented team of commanders and young people working for me, who then helped me take, you know, some vague guidance about how I wanted to fix readiness, how I wanted to create an operational level capability for special warfare that resulted in the 1st SF Command, a division, an extra division for the Army that's focused on special warfare, and build out a no-kidding, world-class unconventional warfare capability that matched our unrivaled counterterrorism capability. So with that broad guidance, I had this talented team, and we set about basically making changes internally and then setting the conditions for what I thought were external changes. So that was basically the vision. And again, I had a great team to help make that happen, you know, from Ben Sokolic at SWIC to just a talented initiatives group that helped put in writing all the things that we wanted to do. The third principle, so I think you have to have the vision, you have to have opportunity, you have to have vision, and then you got to be persistent, right? Because there are going to be a lot of people that will want to knock you off your azimuth in terms of what you're setting out to do. The internal dissent, right, can become that passive aggressive sort of thing that comes with people that just don't want to change. and you can, there's you move them aside. You either convince them or you move them aside. If the external audience that is the tougher audience to, one, support the changes you want to do internally, and then also, like I said, to set the discussion and embark on the discussions to help fix what I saw as this larger problem in the way we were approaching population-centric warfare. So you have to be persistent. You have to have thick skin, but I will tell you this, because we based our changes or proposed changes on pretty rigorous logic and rationale, we had really no resistance from a sense of, we don't think you can do this because, and the logic was based, their resistance was based on warfighting needs, or it was, most of it was just resistance to wanting to change. You have to speak truth to power. Once you're, now as a 3-star, you don't have much to lose, right? So yeah, I felt pretty comfortable, and I'll talk a little bit about my bosses who actually allowed me to have that level of comfort. So you have to speak truth to power. You have to have a thick skin, and then you got to put your money, because where you put your money is your strategy. And so what we did was our vision had to be turned into a programmatic fight for the POM, changing programs, as well as changing doctrine. And so on those twin fronts, we set about working with TRADOC, who gave us the opportunity to write ADP 305, which, contrary to what many people say, was really the first time that the Army allowed its special operations elements to write its doctrine about how it fits into the architecture for defending the country. And that was a hugely powerful tool to help internal change, to explain it, but also very powerful to take to SOCOM to say, okay, this isn't just a notion. This is ADP 305 approved by the United States Army on how we warfight. And now I want to configure the force to do what our doctrine says. The fourth thing is messaging. And I didn't realize how important that was. I mean, you kind of get a sense. My realization came from just how much angst I could see in the formations and throughout the Army when the budget hatchet came out. Everybody started wringing your hands. And the way you counter that is you've got to have a positive message to take out to them. And what we did is we took the vision, we turned it into a series of documents over 3 years called ARSOF 2022, which explained the rationale. We used that document for external audiences and for internal audiences. We briefed it everywhere. I got tired of talking about it, but it was one of those things you just have to do over and over and over again as a senior communicator to bring adherence and get advocates on your side for what you want to do. ARSOF 2022, you can find it online. I think even today it stands up in terms of the logic behind how special operations fits into our Army and frankly into the nation's defense. The last thing is, it's probably a cop-out more than anything else, which is follow through, build for permanence, and just hope you're lucky. Now, the greatest of these is luck. And I had the great fortune of working for General Ray Odierno, who was, informally my boss when he was in Iraq, and I was the CENTCOM or the SOC CENT commander, and CENTCOM Special Operations Theater Forces commander, and all those forces in his theater when he was the theater commander worked under the TSOC, except for the National Force. He became the Chief Staff of the Army when I became USASOC commander. He was there, frankly, probably one of the reasons why I got selected to go up there. But he was a great boss. He was a veteran, combat, battle-hardened, understood from experience what SOF's role had been on the battlefield, had set aside a lot of the petty arguments and BS that had laden and larded up the relationship between SOF and the conventional force, understood that SOF had a unique role to fill and that oftentimes that role was apart from the conventional force. Understood too that part of our gap and deficiency in our community, our national defense community, was that the command and control architecture above the tactical assets in SOF were inadequate. His battle buddy down at SOCOM was Admiral Bill McCraven, another great American. Both of those men set ego aside, you know, unlike some of their peers, you know, quite frankly, during that time frame, who had very large egos. Both of these men were truly about trying to serve the nation and do what's right. You couldn't have asked for two better bosses to help support change. And, you know, if they set the conditions that allowed us to say, look, and I would tell my staff this, if I make them say no, okay, unless the guy saying no wears 4 stars, make them say no. Because you have to stand by what you are promoting and what you believe when you're certainly at that level. And that goes for internal and external changes. You have to build for permanence. You are the command's futurist. And so as you look to the future, you got to realize that, you know, your time in the saddle is very temporary. And so you have to look beyond the horizon. So when you're looking at those that are coming up behind you, you very early on start informing them and get them to be advocates for what you're trying to do. In my case, I was replaced by Ken Tovo, who Ken had come in behind me on 3 or 4 other assignments and had to clean up my mess on all of those occasions. So I felt very comfortable turning the command and its initiatives over to him. I would commend everybody to the Clash of Wills document that was signed by the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Admiral McCraven, and General Odierno. It was a historic document. It talked about the human domain. I said that I thought that we were fundamentally flawed in our approach to defense. I still think that what's missing in our domain model is in fact a human domain. Now, timing of, as said, is also important. You'll recall that about the time that sequestration hit and all the changes that were happening, General Dempsey, as chairman, brought in the cyber domain. With the cyber domain and the advent of cyber domain, a ton of assets had to move over to support the creation of a capability that was needed there. The human domain basically hit it right at the same time that the cyber domain did. And frankly, the Marine Corps was having none of it. And though the Clash of Wills talks about the human domain and its central role in the kinds of fights that we were in, the human domain as a domain still remains outside of our domain model. Multi-domain operations, in my view, without the human domain means that we're ill-suited for counterinsurgencies, supporting counterinsurgencies, unconventional warfare, and those kinds of operations that I think are going to be part and parcel to great power conflict as we look to the future. So anyway, that's it. Opportunity, vision, persistence, messaging, and just a good measure of luck. And Arnel, again, thank you for letting me blather on here a few minutes. I appreciate the chance. Look forward to hearing what everybody else says.
Now, General, those are phenomenal insights that I'm sure everyone can take value in hearing, especially coming from that community and seeing that change happen. That was no easy task to introduce those kinds of changes. So great work, sir, and it still continues to make an impact. So talking about the importance of the human domain and information, I think I'll pivot over to our guest from the UK, Major General Tom. You, sir, have been, from my time arriving here in the UK, you've been instrumental in forging this information maneuver concept, bringing it and changing culture within defense to understand it. And you are not even you're not a communications guy, you're a combat arms leader, an infantryman. So it's kind of great to see you deliver that change. And so, sir, what were the things that help accelerate that fuel for change in defense? And if you could talk to that or whatever else they talked about in terms of how you've introduced change in government, sir.
Well, thank you, Arnel, and many congratulations. That's great news that you're about to be a full bird, and such a privilege to be here today. Thank you for having me. And General Cleveland was my senior mentor on CJ Flick. He taught me most of what I'm going to talk about today. Matt Van Wagenen's an old friend. And Johnny, I don't know you, but I've heard lots of bad things about you from Pete Little. So look forward to seeing you over there in Conus in due course. So innovation and how do we lead, and how important is changing culture? So I think anybody who claims they've got the answers on this is struggling, because this is a daily challenge, at least the way I see it. But firstly, it's great that you're focused on culture to start with, because I see an awful lot of problems with people thinking that technology is going to lead them through their innovation, and if they can get a black box with artificial intelligence on it or something, that's going to take you through the 21st century. It's not. And I just completely underline everything General Cleveland's just said about people, and the requirement for all warfare to be people-centric. The people may change, whether they're your friends or your enemies, or civilians looking in, but it's all about that 6 inches between the left and right ear of your audience, and that's fundamental. And innovation and change is no different from battle. Is no different from operations. It's about changing the mindset of the people you're focusing on. Now we talk about the mind. I do just want to stress at this stage that if we're talking transformational change, sort of stuff General Cleveland's just spoken about, the sort of stuff we're trying to do, as General Sir Mark Carleton-Smith mentioned earlier, moving from an industrial age force to a information age force. It's not just people's minds you're going to change. It's their guts you're going to change. It's their heart you're going to change. There are deeply embedded, dare I say it, emotional things you're going to do to them that are going to tear at the fabric of what they grew up thinking it was to be a soldier. And, I always say we in UK used to have top trumps. I don't know if you had a similar thing, but there were cards that sort of had the power of the engine in the tank and the caliber and how far the shell could go and how strong the armor was. And that's what I grew up thinking soldiering was about, all those physical characteristics. And then I guess as you go on, you realize it's much more about moral characteristics and the sort of human element that General Cleveland spoke about. And now I think we're starting to understand, as well as those sort of human characteristics, our software is really important to us. And the amount of intelligence that you can put onto platforms, which never was on a trump card that I ever saw, is increasingly important. So this changes people's concept of what it is to be a soldier or a sailor or an airman, frankly. And, those are deeply emotional things. So it's not just the 6 inches between two ears. It's also the heart and the guts that we're speaking to as leaders in this space. Well, so what? The good news is that, as I say, innovation and change is just the same as warfare. And it's really lucky that all of our leadership philosophy we have a common leadership philosophy, and we call it mission command. And it's particularly well suited to leading people through change. And of course it is, because it's been forged through centuries of warfare, and it's specifically designed to help people in dynamically changing situations. I guess the difference is that we tend, sadly, to leave our mission command over there in the sandbox, and we don't bring mission command home with us nearly as much as we should, because leading people through change, leading innovation, just requires mission command. It requires that mutual trust, that understanding, that obedience, yes, within wider strategic intent, but the freedom and the trust to then go and execute that intent in whatever way makes sense. So all we're talking here is mission command, which should make both of our armies, both of our defenses, brilliant at change. As I say, maybe we're not, and maybe that's because we leave mission command on the other side of the obstacle crossing, over there, rather than bring it home with us. So I guess that's my major message, is that leading people through innovation and change is really just good mission command. I'm going to caveat that in one small way, and I'll come to that in a second. So what do I mean by that? Well, I think, again, General Cleveland picked this up. It's about communications. And, what do we as leaders do in battle? We spend most of our time communicating, if you think about it. If you get your planning right, there are very few decisions the commander needs to make. And hopefully the chief of staff tees it up for him, and the decision's made and we move on. We spend an awful lot of our time communicating. That doesn't mean just speaking like I'm doing now. It also means listening to the battle, listening to our subordinates, listening to our superiors, listening to our allies and the people alongside us, and indeed listening to the population. So it's about relentless, repeated communication. And as we always say, unless you are thoroughly sick of your message, you're probably not even beginning to break through. So that's the first thing I'll mention, just communication. Now, Arnel, you will know, and I don't have the slides to back it up, so I'm probably failing in my communication, but we used a very simple tool in information maneuver, which was a bit of poetry. I'm going to call it that. The 54321 ditty. That was also a kids' TV program when I was a child. So it had resonance with a certain element of the population, 54321. And it was a graphic, a brilliant graphic put together by a senior NCO in 77 Brigade, our information operations organization. So we had a picture and a simple ditty, which explained how we were going to bring 5 very different information-centric capabilities. That's intelligence and counterintelligence and communications and information systems, our information ops teams, and indeed our cyber and electromagnetic teams. People who had always been divided and ruled by people like me, people who had been kept separate, people who wore different cap badges, who spoke different languages, who didn't like each other, ate in different chow halls, and did not get on. And by bringing them together and telling them how they were going to come together and telling them how they were going to deliver outputs, whether it was understanding or communication or protection or disruption or influence, how they were going to achieve those outputs together as a single team, a team of teams. And really just using that poetry and using that picture was a phenomenally powerful communication tool. It didn't do the whole job, but at least it brought everybody in. And again, going back to mission command, it allowed me to project the strategic intent right down to the most junior soldiers in the division and allow them to then execute in a decentralized way. So I guess that's motherhood and apple pie communications. The next thing I'm just going to briefly mention is something I don't think we focus enough on mission command, and that's collaboration. And that's working with the left and the right and the people outside your immediate chain of command. And I think often we think of mission command in terms of that vertical bit and the freedom to operate when you're separated from your commander. I think sometimes we don't focus on mission command as much as being, yes, separated from your commander, but still fighting for information and fighting to connect to the force on your left and your right. And I don't know about your army, but I know our army is terrible at that. We take such pride in the badges we wear, in the cap badges we wear, in the things we put on our front or our arms or our shoulders, or the uniforms we wear, in our case, the color of the berets we wear. We struggle when we come back from the sandbox to collaborate. And there's very few powerful forces in innovation and change than collaboration. And there's a lovely old phrase, which will bring me on to my third and last point. There's a lovely old phrase that many of you will have heard, that it's incredible what you can do if you don't feel the need to take credit for it. Now, we're all kind of pretty keen on showing how good we are in the military. We're a pretty alpha organization. So let me codify that to, it's amazing what you can achieve if you're prepared to share the credit for doing it. Let's compromise at that, to share the credit. And then I'd add a codicil, and this will bring me on to my last point. It's amazing what you can do if you're prepared to share the credit and if you're prepared to fail. It's amazing what you can do if you're prepared to share the credit and if you're prepared to fail. And of course, in failing, if you're prepared to sign up to be the only one who takes the rap for that failure, even though you're going to share credit with others for the success. So of course, that last thing is risk. And again, we say we're good at this on operations. We say we're good at risk. Well, I think, best part of 30 years of counterinsurgency and people-centric operations, the strategic corporal factor has meant that I think some of us have got a bit wary of risk. And as we bring innovation and change back into the home base, we really need to dial up that risk. And there's only one way our soldiers are going to take risk, and that is if you're leading it from the front. And if they know that they're operating in a safe space, in a free umbrella, a free bubble of risk that you've given them. And they'll only take risk if they know you've got their back. So again, you're going to give them credit when they get it right. But when they get it wrong, they know you're going to take the whipping and you're going to protect them. And I know we say all these things. I mean, nobody in this audience has not heard that said before, but you know it when you see it. And we don't see it enough yet, of people prepared to take sensible risks, sometimes unsensible risks, but honest risks. Yeah, there are all sorts of risks you shouldn't be taking, but good, honest risk. We want to dial it up to 11, as the old Spinal Tap film used to say. We want to dial risk up to 11. And that culture can only be set from above. So I'll just leave you one last thought on culture. And this is very much for those leading change. You know, I always think of culture as a combination of belief and behavior. And I'm sure that's not a scientific definition, but it works for me, belief and behavior. And I do think if you're leading innovation or change, unless you believe what you're doing, you better hand the baton to somebody else. Because, you know, I find I can bluff my peers pretty easily. Yeah. I've even managed to bluff my superiors repeatedly through my lifetime and my career, but I've never been able to bluff soldiers. They see right through me. And I just say, if you're being asked to lead change, unless you believe in it, when your boss calls you in and says, Tom, I want you to take this on, if you're not prepared to get behind it and believe in it, you're probably best, sir, that's a good one. I'll introduce you to Frank. He believes in that, but I'm not here. Because the soldiers will see right through it. So you got to believe in it. And if you don't, you best get out the way. And then, of course, the behavior bit, you got to lead it and you got to behave it. And, you know, if in my case, you're asking to digitize defense, getting your emails printed by your aide is probably not the right thing to do anymore. Once upon a time, it made us seem like a sort of muddy boot soldier. That ain't the 21st century in my world at the moment. So belief and behavior leads that culture. That's all from me at this stage, Arnel, but I hope that helps.
No, General, that's those are some great insight. Loads to digest there already with the two generals. I knew we had a super panel here, some great ideas. Hopefully, people are taking notes. This good stuff here to learn from you both so far. So when people think about innovation, they tend to. We just talked about institutional innovation or changes, and I want to shift over to General Van Wagenen, sir. You know, you innovated in combat. You were right there back in our Ramadi in the thick of the fight. I mean, many of our listeners here know, you know, the SEAL team with Chris Kyle. You're working with that team, mixing special forces and, you know, conventional forces together to come together to collaborate and solve a really dynamic, complex problem in Iraq. So, sir, what kind of tactics, what kind of things did you do to innovate so that we can begin to turn the tide in that particular fight, sir?
Hey, good morning, Arnel. Official congratulations. Hey, great to see Major Gen Tom Copinger-Symes, a friend, and General Cleveland, a mentor of mine who actually educated me in my GO basic course. And many of the stuff he taught me there, I've taken through to this day. And of course, Johnny Davis, a dear friend down there at Futures Command, driving change to the U.S. Army out of Austin. You know, I think if I won't reflect back to those, you know what we did in combat when I was working for retired General McFarland and Ramadi. I think what the lesson I took from that is, you have to adapt in combat, but we had to make too many changes there. What we don't want to do is get back in that situation again, where we're innovating in contact with the enemy. It goes back with what General Cleveland said there. You know, we didn't understand the human dimension of what we were involved in. So I think, rather than say, Sons of Anbar, Ramadi was a big success story, I think I would actually say the opposite. We paid too much blood and treasure there because we had to innovate in the face of the enemy. We don't want to do that. We don't want to give our adversary the time to get out in front of us again. And I think that's some of the lessons we took out of early in Iraq and the surge. And then we were able to overcome that later. So that's one part. I think with innovation, I think the other part is, what is the problem here we're trying to solve? And there's probably multiple problems out there. And that's what Army Futures is looking at. Is it a problem that's the next 5 years? Is it a problem we think is going to be in 30 years? And I think there's confusion out there, when we talk of innovation, of what is the problem we're trying to solve. I will give you an immediate problem of innovation that's in contact with competition right now, and I'm directly involved in it. I will move over to the U.S. Fifth Corps that's being rebuilt, that's being put back European-faced to solve a problem over there, and that is to fill an operational capability that was gapped when that corps was taken down in 2008. But it's a new era over in Europe right now, and things are changing dramatically. There's a great power competition going on over there. What we've seen from the annexation of Crimea to Russian aggressions in the Baltics, and now again against Ukraine, we're reacting, we're innovating in contact of competition, if you will say. And we're having to rebuild and reorganize to do this. Fifth Corps is a great example of that. I really appreciate General Cleveland's comments in there about opportunity, vision, and persistence, because as we introduce a new corps back into Europe, it's not the corps that left in 2008 when we were involved in counterinsurgency. And that corps was either focused back in Iraq or then went into Afghanistan. And it's not the corps that was there during the 90s, during the Balkans, and Kosovo. This corps is gonna have to go back in the great power competition that probably looks something like at the end of the Cold War, but it's not. It's got to be different than that, because what that corps is going to be able to have to do, how it's going to be able to compete in day-to-day operations across Europe are vastly different. And it's going to take, innovation, and it's going to take leadership. And it's interesting, it will go up against what General Cleveland exactly said, that I see it now. There's an internal struggle when you do organizational change, but then there's also external struggles. Is how do you convince people, what needs to be done? And that goes back to that part about messaging. That is the strategic leaders. If you talk about innovation, I think is the biggest thing. It's messaging, what we're trying to solve here. Goes back to that. What is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the importance, and why do we innovate in this? So those are kind of, my big thoughts on innovation. It goes back, to the problem. And if it's not a problem, then do we need to solve it right now? The other part, we're going to go back in here because we're going into, we're in a COVID environment right now that's not going away. And there is going to be fiscal realities that come with this, both in the United States, in our Department of Defense, but across NATO. As NATO and the 30 countries in NATO, as they compete, as they look at resources that they're going to have to put forth socially to help solve COVID, to help get over the pandemic. But then, how much money do they have left to put in defense? This is going to take a new innovation and a very different way of looking at things. But these are going to be hard choices. So those are kind of, my big comments. I appreciate General Cleveland's comments, really, sir, on as you talked about organizational innovation and change, because they really ring true home. I think what's going on right now in a lot of places in the United States Army. So I'll close my comments there. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, General. So really insightful. We'll pivot over to General Davis. I mean, this morning, General Mike Murray and General Mark Carlton Smith were talking about Project Convergence and a lot of stuff that's going on Futures Command. But sir, you're right. The nexus of all that change, the Chief of Staff, and Futures Command, it's really exciting. A lot of stuff going on. Me personally, Army, going to go serve a little further now. Can you just talk to some of the change that you guys are delivering? I know there's a lot, but what are kind of your favorite things, sir? Over to you.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to see everybody, and congrats, Arnel. General Cleveland, it's good to see you again, sir, and Major Tom. Thank you for your leadership and our enduring ironclad partnership. And then Matt, you and I go back many years, so it's great to see you. Let me tell you, this is exciting. 28.5 years as an infantryman, and then the Army asked me to jump into the modernization realm with Joint Modernization Command, now as Chief of Staff. And what I have seen and the progress over the last 2 years has been unbelievable when we are all in leadership, especially led by General Murray. He is all in, and we are going to move forward across so many different spectrums, across all domains. And I just want to share a couple with you, but I can talk for hours because I have seen it, touched it, smelled it. This is game changing. But first and foremost, I want to talk about, how do you deliver innovation and change? One is you focus and invest in the soldiers to do it. Two areas that we went all in on is, of course, our software factory. And from an Army perspective, first of its kind, fully immersive software development that places soldiers first in modernization. So when you talk about coding at the tactical edge, That means you're going all in. And so I know General Murray talked about this earlier. We only had 24 seats, 2,000 applicants, 2 weeks, cohort 1, just within the Army. Cohort 2, we expanded to some seats to our DA civilians because we got to be very inclusive. Thousands of applications for 25 seats. Now, let me, there's got to be something special with it, and I can talk about that. But, we also did this at the intersection of modern tech industry, academia, and then placing a 4-star headquarters here in Austin, Texas, fastest growing tech innovation ecosystem in the United States. I'm 5 minutes from Google, Facebook, and Apple. I can name the few. I can walk out the door and go to any one of them and walk right in. And just as, this is now taking what industry has been focusing on and placing it in the hands of soldiers, such as, agile software development, cloud technology, DevSecOps, using the cyber security model. This is what we're training the soldiers, and they love it. I mean, and cohort 1 is started up. They're over at our Austin Community College, which is not even half a mile away from our location here in downtown Austin. And they are complete superstars, And oh, by the way, we didn't have a way to identify them with our legacy human resources. These were soldiers who were doing either signal, tank crewmen, and infantrymen. And at night, they are coding. And we had no way of identifying that until they came forward to share that with us. So that's this emerging tech talent that General Murray is trying, and the chief and the secretary are trying to create a system and how to identify these gifted, naturally gifted superstars. And this is one area. So, that's the software factory. The second one I like to talk about is really everything in terms of our investment towards, modernization should be focused around soldier-centered design or soldier touch points. They should drive the requirements. So what do? We bring the soldiers. So everything we're invested in, the 31+4, we bring soldiers in the middle of that process, in that development process, to inform industry, testers, researchers, and acquisition experts. So try and decide, but do it in the hands of soldiers. These soldiers, their engagements help generate, really soldier-initiated problems. So what we think, we give this box to a soldier and we think he uses it to do A, but essentially he doesn't do A. He does B and C. And no one was there to capture that. Well, now we're there to capture that. And I love it because I've been at these soldier touch points. We got one going on right now with the integrated visual augmentation system down at Fort Bragg. And we have every, from every partner that's involved with that on the ground and listening to our men and women tell them, hey, this doesn't work, or it fogs up, or it doesn't do this. And so the next time we put the next IVAS, which is, we're going to try to do it in about 2 months. That's how quick we're turning this. And that's powerful. And now the soldiers get to see, what their input has provided in terms of modernization. And so that's the rapid iteration of prototypes. So not that you buy an IVAS that we built 2 years ago, and that's the 200,000 system at scale that we purchased. No, this could be, by next summer, we could be on, Soldier Touch Point 6 or IVAS version number 10. That's how fast we are turning this. And I love it. And these soldier touch points drive requirements. So you see how the soldiers play a part in this, and all the processes needed to make them lethal and more powerful on the future battlefield. They are all in. So, example, we have soldier touch points going on all the time. the bosses was just yesterday, Fort Bragg. We got the synthetic training environment. Oh, that's a space I will share with you. Is we're making some huge gains. The long range precision fires. If you talk ERK-A, extended long range cannon, long range hypersonic weapon, medium range capability, precision strike missile, I can go on all morning and tell you some of these. I mean, and we're going to make a soldier touch point or a 500-kilometer shot on some of these things. We're turning it very quickly. So that really gets after soldiers and how they drive modernization. And then you bring everybody to the table with that young soldier, because they're the ones, with us. We're going to, invest in them, but they're the ones that are taking this force into the future. And I'll stop right there, because this is exciting stuff from Army Futures Command. Okay.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, no, sir. Thank you. Amazing stuff. So on that note of like software AI, I'm over here now in NATO. General Van Wagenen has successfully sold and got us on an experiment here with General Smith, General Ed Osborne Smith, Smith Osborne, sorry, to try out using some software, using some AI. Sir, General Van Wagenen, can you talk to the group here about how in NATO, we normally just do the same things and do really well, but now you created a breach here that this past week, it looks like a lot of leaders from multiple nations want to exploit. And then after you talk to that, you go to General Tom, sir, because here we are, you mentioned collaboration. So here we are connecting the dots and getting us all working together to win. Sir, General Van Wagenen, what did you do to convince General Smith Osborne to give us a shot?
Well, I think, the one thing, there's universal agreement in NATO, and it's the speed of information. It's the speed of decision making. The acceleration of, in the information domain, we all know it's moving so fast. So we need AI, we need decision making tools. A lot of that experimentation is going on down at Army Futures right now, but we need to break this into NATO. And this was really Karl Marx push to let's experiment. And we're doing that right now with the NATO pre-eval we're on in the planning process. But I want to, and I think it's good stuff, but I think more importantly, I want to go back to something that General Davis talked about, soldier up innovation in the human domain, and they can are putting stuff in the hands of our soldiers to do this. Because I think, that is critical. I think a grassroots movement that we see in the UK is the UK Fight Club that is funded by the British Army. But it's inside of NATO and inside of our allies and partners. We've got 500 plus participants in this. And what we've got is junior leaders, from non-commissioned officers to young soldiers, to people that work in civil service in London, to senior leaders in this wargaming space on a continual level in the experimentation space. And what we see here is a diversity of innovation, of bringing different people together here with our allies and partners to really war game and really look at what the future of war looks like and do this. I think that's a great example of allowing everybody into the room that are our allies and partners, of course, to get in this. That's UK funded. That is a great initiative, and there's lessons being captured and learned out of that that are going to go back into modernization of many different things, to include our NATO formations. So that's kind of my comments on that, Arnel. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Thank you for making that important plug. And General Tom Copinger-Symes is looking to exploit the UK Flight Club as well. I smell with David Hamilton, Futures Command, America's Futures, future panel here with some younger, additional special accents talking about UK Fight Club. But General Tom, over to you, sir. Can you comment on some of the initiatives you have at Defense? You've been in that job now for a while, and I know you're about to deliver some stuff into the government. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Just a hearty endorsement of UK Flight Club. I think they'll make a great America's Future series to explain what you're doing there. Not least because gaming is such a and simulation is such a powerful way to change culture and put new tools in soldiers' hands and change the way they think about fighting and bring to life some of that human domain or that human dimension that General Cleveland was talking about. as for AI, I mean, so a lot of focus on shrinking budgets here. I mean, we've just been handed, slightly to our surprise, this huge budget increase for us. Now, I'm going to talk in percentile terms because otherwise you Americans will switch off and think it's a piddling little amount. But for us, it's a big amount that our budget's just gone up. And of course, my last 18 months with Strategic Command, who I work for, General Sir Patrick Sanders, has been arguing for our slice of that pie. And again, that's a tough fight because you are going up against people's deeply wedded views of what it is to be a soldier and so on. So how are we getting artificial intelligence going and what do we need for it? Well, we talk a lot about the holy trinity of artificial intelligence, you know, the massive compute that we're now getting from the cloud, the algorithms, clearly, which are what most people focus on. You know, that's the tech for AI that people think if you just got the algorithm, you're all right. Not quite the case. You need the compute. And critically, the special source that most people forget is that data, that curated data that's ready for machines to mangle, to train those algorithms, you know, particularly in terms of machine learning, which is where you're seeing this latest giant leap in AI. Now, we all know that's going to rip apart all of defense, you know, and whether it's decision support or logistics or how we train our people or how we select our people, you know, every single J branch or G branch is going to be affected by that. But of course, the bit that always gets missed from that holy trinity of sort of compute and algorithms and data is the people. And, you know, that is the real special sauce. It's the people. And, you know, what General Johnny's just talked about your ability to access talent in Austin and the software house that you're building there. And by the way, General, as soon as we can, we want to, Pete Little setting up an interaction, I think, between my digital foundry, same idea, cross defense, federated, and your software center. You know, getting talented people into that is key. And this is the really important thing. They're not all going to be coders. I mean, we need good coders, but also you really need soldiers who really understand the process that we're trying to automate or the thing that we're trying to produce an autonomous process or machine to do. And so, you know, knuckle draggers like myself aren't going out of business just yet. I'm not a coder, but I spent 30 years fighting one way or another. And it's that multidisciplinary bringing together coders with people who really understand how to fight, with designers, with people who can write good English to communicate. You know, it's those multidisciplinary teams that is the real special source for what we happen to call AI, which is, you know, good code running on big computers with the right data to change them. So I think that's the special source we're all coming back to is it's the people, stupid. And we've got to make sure we can attract them and retain them and upskill the ones we've got already. I hope that helps, Arnel.
No, John Tom, thank you. I don't know if General Cleveland or General Davis want to comment on that. Give it a second here if you guys want to say anything on that note. Okay.
Hey, one. Let me comment just a bit on AI. One is AI and big data, all that stuff that General Davis was talking about, and what's happening with social media and such. One of the things that's allowing us to do is look into the local situations in a way that we've never had the ability to do that, right? We can understand where the seeds of instability now are starting to spring up much earlier in the process. And I think that will bring us to a place where we should start thinking about, and this is, again, is not as a defense thing per se, although security, it has a role in the entire spectrum, but to look earlier on about how we can actually inoculate ourselves or the places that matter to us that are in our interests from instability by knowing the local as we see and we scrape and we understand, if you will, what's starting to take root in the places that matter to us. So it could push the necessity for us to look further into the competition phase, I think, as opposed to just focus on, if you will, the war phase, right? And I think that's going to be important. I think AI is going to give us the chance to actually perhaps do the, you know, penny worth of prevention versus the, you know, the pound of cure. The other thing is, if you take all of these advances, as General Davis was talking about, Tom, you guys, one of the things that its effect on deterrence is yet to be determined, right? I can see a time in which it becomes my machines are faster and more lethal than your machines. And we could find, even though, I mean, again, the man has got to be in the middle. We think that. I'm not sure our authoritarian adversaries necessarily think that. And if they think they can gain advantage, if you will, by killing quicker and on a more massive scale with more precision, then they're going to take advantage of that. And so I kind of worry in our thinking. I realize what the impacts are at the tactical level, but as you look long term about where this goes, you could find yourself almost in a feudal sort of scenario where armies position themselves, mechanical armies largely position themselves, and then the war is concluded because an algorithm says I can't win, right? And so again, it's a two-edged sword. I'm not saying, I'm not a futurist. I don't know, but I think it behooves us all to think and keep thinking deeply about what these impacts are, way beyond just the tactical piece, but up at the strategic piece. And again, in my view, given who we're arrayed against as a Western society, our adversaries who are authoritarian, not bound by many of the same morals and guidelines that we have that constrain us. So anyway, my thoughts.
Yeah, you just answered a question that just came in, sir. I think that kind of covered it, asking the difference between US, UK, and then our adversaries like China. So I'll go there. So one last question that Colonel Brian Cook had put onto the chat. Does the changing nature of war, especially in the human domain, as it dictates, that we don't fall in love with our strategy and long-term plans? I mean, so I suppose he's asking is the enduring nature of war with the human domain, are we looking too far out with our plans? And I hope that does justice to your question, Brian. So real quick, rapid fire, because I know we're running out of time, but any thoughts there from the group?
I'll give it a go if it helps. I mean, I think the idea of iterative strategies, just like the DevSecOps approach that General Davis was speaking about earlier, this is just how we fight. You put a recce out, you get a hypothesis together, you get a plan, and a plan is only a hypothesis. If you fall in love with it, you're probably going to get upset. And as soon as contacts started, you're changing the plan. And I think, this is deep in our psyche, but we forget about this when we come home from operations. And we just need to use the same approach that we do on operations in our day-to-day lives. And, we've got all those tools, if only we can operationalize it. So that's my thought on that. Iterative emergent strategy, not imagining that it lasts for 10 years and the enemy doesn't get a vote.
No, thanks for that, General.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
So, Arnel, can I add? Yeah, sir. First of all, General Cleveland and Tom, thanks for those comments, sir. What you discussed about this whole competition space, and the role of artificial intelligence. What I would tell you, and I've learned a lot in the last 2 years. But AI means different things to different people depending on what sector you land in, and ask for their feedback. What I would tell you is that as we look at the algorithms of the future, of course, we just stood up the Artificial Intelligence, Integration Center. We're trying to understand, know first, so we can act first. And using all of the systems and these the AI technologies to help determine what those indicators and warnings are across the world. So the integrating both deep sensing capabilities, the media, the information space, all of those different areas that can turn strategic today. And I'll tell you, it is eye-opening. I mean, we're looking at, really from a data-driven leadership perspective, a cloud, scientist, determinant, and then how do you take these algorithms and place them in there, and then what comes off the factory room floor? So that's hard. But I'll tell you, this is eye-opening, especially in terms of deep sensing as a force, as a joint force. How do we use AI, and Project Convergence is doing that with us. I know the UK has been with us from the very beginning. It's going to be huge next year for 22. But now we're looking at how we use the brains of Project Convergence, or this firestorm, with the updated algorithms, both deep sensing, determining, what's the best shooter, what's the right C2 node. These are all happening in seconds compared to what they were minutes, tens of minutes, a year and a half ago. This is seconds, over 200, 300 kilometers, both electromagnetic space, metallurgically, optically. This is unbelievable. And then, so you're not having 1,000, soldiers behind screens trying to determine. You have all of these, systems that AI algorithms that we just owned, just in the last year doing this for us. It's unbelievable. But I'll stop right there, because, like I said, I can go on for hours.
No, this has been a fantastic super panel here.
Arnel, can I say something to that?
Yeah, absolutely, sir.
Very quickly, I would just tell you that, it's about diversity of thought when it comes to innovation too. And so we're great collaboratively with the British Army and the UK Defence, because there's natural binds there. But we've got to go way beyond that. I mean, what I've learned in NATO is, there's 30 NATO partners out there. That individual country might not have the resources, maybe to modernize right now, or to innovate, but they have the knowledge, and they might not speak English either. We have really got to listen to our partners and our allies in there as we move forward on this modernization and this innovation. Because I think there's a danger not to, because how a problem is solved, or what the problem is, if you live in other, and I'll talk strictly from NATO, from other NATO nations, is very different than how we see it. It's the same as Indo-PACOM. The Australians will have a very different way of approaching the China problem, maybe, than we do. We've got to listen. I won't talk on that theater. I'm not an Indo-PACOM person, but I think there's a real danger here of going down linear thought when you start talking about modernization, innovation, if we're only talking to some of our closest partners. I'll stop on that. Thank you.
That's a great insight, sir. Fantastic. And to this super panel of generals that have done a lot of innovation in your time, and thanks for your service, and you continue to serve. Thank you for supporting the panel, and to America's Future Series. Thanks for giving us a platform to share our ideas. Over to David Hamilton and Mr. Murray. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colonel. And again, congratulations on your promotion, and to your outstanding panel. Gentlemen, thank you. Well done. Well done. Very informative. As we continue on with our America's Future Series Defense Innovation Summit, that was pretty good stuff. It's fascinating to listen to some of these gentlemen and what they do on a day-to-day basis.
It's fantastic to have them together. It is exactly what we're about, is bringing all of these sort of folks together. We're going to go to break here in a second, but just real quick before we go, I'm a bit of an Anglophile, love the British,
right.
Married a Brit,
right?
Married in England, sons have dual citizenship, all that kind of good stuff. England, as a historical example, is an example of really, there's a parallel here. That small island, at one point, the sun never set on the British Empire, right? And it wasn't because they had resources. It wasn't because they had more trees to build ships with or anything like that, or more iron, or it wasn't they had more gold, right. et cetera. It was clearly their industriousness and their innovation, et cetera, and their ability to organize, bring people together and get the most out of them. And any society, any country, any organization, any military that gets the most out of its people wins. Any football team, any basketball team, or whatever, et cetera, right? You can have a few superstars, but you have to have, you got to it's a combined effort. And if we get the most out of the best of us and the least of us, the the most senior, the most junior, et cetera. And I loved what they said. It was brought up, and I think it was Brigadier General Van Wagenen said, we've got to work with the smaller countries in NATO, some who might not speak English, who may not have a lot of resources, but they have knowledge and capabilities. And the more we get out of them and every single person, and I love some of the sentences and the enthusiasm of Brigadier General Johnny Davis, and getting the most out of the soldier, having the soldier drive the solutions, et cetera, having, they're the ones that are going to use these things, and them actually coding it, fixing it, improving it, breaking it, doing it again. That's heartening to hear that.
Great common sense. You know, and in so many of the things that they said, you can say, oh, gee, I never thought of that. Oh, that's, you know, and in some of it's such common sense, but you just sometimes,
but not always done.
Exactly right. Yeah. It really isn't. It's sad, but true.
I'm glad to see that they are doing it.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
I guess we're going to take about a 5-6 minute break.
Sounds good.
And then we'll be back for more exciting conversations and important discussions.
Good. We'll see you shortly. Don't go away.